You have a loyalty to your current circumstances that you have never once questioned. It runs so deep, so silently, so constantly through every hour of your day that you do not experience it as loyalty at all. You experience it as common sense. You call it being grounded. You call it being practical. You call it being an adult. And every single day, this unexamined allegiance to what you can see and touch and measure is quietly, methodically, with breathtaking precision, rebuilding the exact life you say you want to escape. Nobody told you this was happening. Nobody could have, because the people around you are doing the same thing. They wake up, they survey their problems. They feel the weight of those problems settle into their chest, and they call that feeling reality. They call that heaviness truth. And then they spend the rest of the day making decisions, having conversations, and carrying an emotional posture that is perfectly calibrated to produce tomorrow's version of the same situation, not because they are foolish, not because they lack ambition, but because they have been taught from the moment they could understand language that the responsible thing to do with reality is to face it, accept it, deal with it, and above all, never pretend it is anything other than what it appears to be. What if that teaching is the single most destructive thing you ever learned? Let us begin with what you actually mean when you say you are being realistic. Because that word, realistic, has become a kind of sacred cow in modern life. It is treated as an unquestionable virtue. The realistic person is the mature person. The realistic person is the one who sees things clearly. The realistic person is the one who does not get swept away by fantasy or delusion. And anyone who suggests that you should pay less attention to your current circumstances is immediately categorized as naive, irresponsible, or detached from the real world. But here is what nobody examines. What does being realistic actually produce? Look at the people you know who pride themselves on being realistic. Are they free? Are they thriving? Are they living lives that pulse with possibility and joy? Or are they maintaining? Are they managing? Are they holding steady at a level of existence that feels safe but never satisfying, congratulating themselves on their maturity while quietly suffocating under the weight of a life that never seems to expand? Being realistic, the way most people practice it, is not a strategy for navigating the world effectively. It is a strategy for ensuring that tomorrow looks exactly like today. Because when you face your current reality and accept it as the definitive truth about your life, when you let it saturate your emotional state and dictate the boundaries of what you believe is possible, you are not being wise. You are being obedient. You are obeying an old set of results. You are bowing to a printout from a machine that you yourself programmed, and you are treating that printout as though it were a verdict handed down by some authority greater than you. It is not. Your current reality is not a verdict. It is not a final answer. It is not even current. It is the physical, delayed expression of thoughts you thought, emotions you felt, and beliefs you held weeks and months and years ago. You are not looking at the present. You are looking at the past, wearing the costume of the present, and you are letting it dictate your future. Think of it this way. Imagine you are sitting in a courtroom. Every morning, you walk into this courtroom and you take your seat, and on the opposite side, your current reality takes the stand. It presents its evidence, the bank balance, the difficult relationship, the body that does not look the way you want it to, the career that feels stalled. It lays all of this out with impressive detail and says to you, with the calm authority of a seasoned prosecutor, "This is who you are. This is what your life is. The evidence is clear. The verdict is obvious." And every single morning, you accept the verdict. You nod. You agree. You feel the familiar sinking in your stomach, and you walk out of the courtroom and into a day that has already been shaped by your agreement with that evidence. You have pleaded guilty to being the person your circumstances say you are. But here is what you have forgotten. You are not the defendant in this courtroom. You are the judge. You are the one who decides what the evidence means. You are the one who determines whether that evidence defines your future or simply describes your past. The evidence is real. Nobody is asking you to pretend it does not exist. The bank balance is what it is. The relationship dynamics are what they are. But evidence from the past does not have to become a sentence for the future. Not unless you allow it. Not unless you gavel it into permanence with your emotional agreement every single morning. The question is not whether your current reality exists. Of course it exists. The question is whether you are going to let it have the final word. Now, this is where most people stumble, because the distinction I am drawing here sounds dangerously close to something they have been warned against their entire lives. It sounds like denial. It sounds like sticking your head in the sand. It sounds like the kind of delusional thinking that leads people to ignore their bills, neglect their health, and float through life in a bubble of false optimism while everything around them crumbles. That is not what this is. And the distinction is critical, so let me make it as clear as I possibly can. Denial is unconscious. It is a refusal to see what is there. It is a defense mechanism that protects you from pain by blinding you to reality. A person in denial does not know they are in denial. They are not making a choice. They are running. What I am describing is the opposite of unconscious. It is the most deliberate, disciplined, aware thing you can do with your mind. It is looking directly at your circumstances, seeing them with total clarity, handling anything that requires practical action, and then making a conscious decision about how much emotional authority you are willing to grant them. You see the evidence. You deal with the logistics, but you refuse to let the evidence rewrite your identity. You refuse to let it contaminate your emotional state. You refuse to walk out of that courtroom feeling like a person who is defined by a set of temporary conditions. This is not ignoring reality in the way a child covers their eyes and pretends the monster is not there. This is ignoring reality the way a surgeon ignores a patient's panic and focuses on the operation. The surgeon is fully aware of the crisis. The surgeon is not pretending everything is fine. But the surgeon has decided, with calm authority, that the crisis does not get to determine the quality of their focus. The crisis does not get to direct the surgery. The surgeon's trained, steady, internal state directs the surgery, and the outcome depends entirely on that internal state, not on the noise surrounding it. You are the surgeon. Your life is the operation, and your current reality is the noise in the room. It is real, but it does not get to hold the scalpel. Here is the mechanism that makes this more than philosophy. Here is why this actually works, why it produces tangible, measurable changes in your physical reality, and why every teacher who has ever understood the architecture of human experience has pointed toward this same principle. Your reality is not a static thing that exists independently of you. It is a feedback loop. Your external world produces an experience. That experience triggers an emotional response. That emotional response generates a dominant feeling. That dominant feeling shapes your thoughts, your assumptions, your expectations, and the energetic signal you broadcast every moment of your day. And that signal, that broadcast, is the instruction set for what comes next. The universe does not deliver what you ask for with your words. It delivers what you ask for with your frequency. And your frequency is determined almost entirely by what you are feeling on a consistent basis. So when you look at your problems and feel the heavy, familiar weight of discouragement, you are not just having a bad morning. You are placing an order. You are sending a signal that says, "More of this, please." Not because the universe is cruel or mechanical or indifferent, but because the system works on resonance, like attracts like. The frequency you emit is the frequency you receive. And if the frequency you emit every morning is the frequency of a person who is trapped in their circumstances, then the circumstances that show up tomorrow will be a perfect match for that signal. This is the trap that keeps millions of people running on the same loop for decades. They see their problems. They react emotionally to their problems. That emotional reaction generates a signal. That signal produces more of the same circumstances. Those circumstances trigger the same emotional reaction. And the cycle repeats seamlessly, endlessly, with such consistency that the person eventually concludes this is simply how life works, when in fact it is simply how they have been operating the machinery without knowing it. The only way to break the loop is to interrupt the signal, and the only way to interrupt the signal is to stop reacting emotionally to your current circumstances as though they are the final truth about your life. Think of it as a movie projector. Most people are sitting in the theater of their life, staring at the screen, watching images they do not want to see, and desperately trying to reach up and rearrange the picture on the screen with their bare hands. They are adjusting the shadows. They are trying to push characters into different positions. They are working themselves to exhaustion, trying to change the movie by manipulating the projection. But the projection is not the source. The projection is the output. The source is the film running through the projector behind them, the reel, the strip of images that is being fed through the light and cast onto the screen. If you want to change what appears on the screen, you do not touch the screen. You change the reel. You change the film that is being projected. And the film, in your life, is your dominant internal state, your habitual thoughts, your repeated emotions, your deep, unquestioned assumptions about who you are and what is possible for you. Every morning that you wake up, scan your problems and let them dictate how you feel. You are loading yesterday's film into the projector and pressing play. You are choosing the same reel. And then you are sitting in the theater, watching the same movie, wondering why the story never changes. Ignoring reality, in the way I am describing it, means you stop staring at the screen and you walk to the projector. You eject the old film. You load a new one. And you press play on that instead. The screen will not update instantly. There is a lag. The old images will continue to flicker for a while, because the machinery of physical reality does not rearrange itself overnight. But if you keep the new film running, if you refuse to panic and swap back to the old reel every time the screen still shows yesterday's footage, the projection must change. It has no mechanism to do otherwise. The screen has no choice but to display whatever is running through the projector. So what does this look like in practice? What does it actually mean to live this way, day after day, in the middle of a life that is still showing you evidence of the old film? It begins in the first minutes of the morning, before you reach for your phone, before you check your messages or review your to-do list, or let the demands of the world set the tone for your day. You give yourself 5 minutes, perhaps 10, to consciously choose your internal state, not by forcing positivity, not by lying to yourself, but by entering a vivid sensory experience of the life you are moving toward. You close your eyes and you step into a scene, not a grand, dramatic scene, an ordinary moment from the life of the person you are becoming. You feel the ease in your body. You feel the absence of the weight you have been carrying. You notice how your breathing is slower, deeper, calmer. You notice what your morning looks like when money is not a source of anxiety. You notice what your interactions feel like when your relationships are nourishing instead of draining. You do not merely visualize this, you inhabit it. You let the emotion of it rise in your body until it is more present than the emotion you woke up with. Then you open your eyes and you step into your day. And here is the discipline. Here is where the real practice lives. Throughout the day, your current reality will tap you on the shoulder. It will present its evidence. The email with bad news, the unexpected expense, the conversation that reminds you of the distance between where you are and where you want to be. And in each of those moments, you face a choice that most people do not even know they are making. You can react, which means you allow the circumstance to reach into your chest and set your emotional frequency. You let it pull you back into the old film. You feel the old familiar contraction, the tightness, the worry, the resignation. And in that reaction, you have just fed the loop. You have just told the projector to keep running yesterday's reel. Or you can respond, which means you acknowledge the circumstance, handle whatever practical action it requires, and then deliberately Consciously, with the discipline of someone who understands how the machinery works, choose not to let it define your emotional state. You see the bill. You pay it or you make a plan to pay it. But you do not spiral into the identity of someone who is drowning financially. You have the difficult conversation. But you do not collapse into the story that love will never work for you. You deal with the logistics without surrendering your frequency. This is not suppression. Suppression is shoving an emotion down and pretending it does not exist. What I am describing is processing, without identifying. You can feel the flash of frustration and let it pass through you without making it a chapter in your autobiography. You can notice the spike of worry without building a house on it and moving in for the season. The emotion arrives. You feel it. You let it move. And then you return to the state you chose that morning. Every return is a victory. Every time you catch yourself drifting back to the old reel and gently, without self-punishment, walk back to the projector and reload the new film, you are rewiring the loop. You are weakening the old pattern and strengthening the new one. Now, I want to be honest with you about what happens when you begin this practice in earnest. Because if I do not prepare you, the very thing that signifies progress will convince you that nothing is working. When you change your internal signal, when you genuinely begin to operate from a different frequency, your external reality does not immediately celebrate. It tests. The old circumstances may intensify. Things that were merely frustrating may become acute. People who were subtly unsupportive may become openly resistant. And the temptation, the almost irresistible temptation, is to interpret this as proof that the shift was foolish. To say, I tried to ignore reality and look what happened. It got worse. But it did not get worse because your shift failed. It got worse because your shift succeeded. You changed the signal, and the old reality, which was built on the old signal, is now destabilizing because the foundation it rested on is no longer there. What you are witnessing is not collapse. It is demolition. The old structure has to come down before the new one can rise in its place. And demolition, from the inside, feels chaotic and frightening and looks nothing like the finished building you are moving toward. Your only job during this phase is to hold your frequency. Not perfectly, not with robotic discipline, but with the steady, returning commitment of someone who understands what is happening. You will waver. You will have moments where the old evidence seems so loud and so real that you wonder if you have been fooling yourself. You will have 3 a.m. moments where the fear feels more convincing than the faith. This is normal. This is not failure. This is what it feels like to cross the bridge between one version of your life and another. The bridge is not comfortable. It was never supposed to be. But it is the only way to the other side. There is a particular kind of strength that develops in someone who has learned to hold their internal state steady, while the external world has not yet caught up. It is not the loud, aggressive strength of someone who forces outcomes through sheer willpower. It is the quiet, almost invisible strength of someone who has decided, in the deepest core of who they are, that their inner reality is more real than their outer circumstances. These are the people who walk into rooms and something shifts, not because they are performing confidence, because they are genuinely operating from a frequency that is no longer at the mercy of what they can see. You have met people like this. You could not always explain what was different about them. They did not seem to be trying. They were not hustling harder than everyone else. They carried a settledness, a calm authority over their own experience that made the world seem to reorganize around them rather than the other way around. Opportunities found them. Doors opened without being forced. Conversations led to connections that led to outcomes that looked from the outside like extraordinary luck. It was not luck. It was the natural consequence of a human being who stopped letting the old projection dictate their frequency and started projecting something new. The world did not change because they worked harder. The world changed because they changed the film. Here's what I want to leave with you. And I want you to hold this not as an idea, but as something you feel in the center of your body. You have been staring at your circumstances the way a person stares at a rearview mirror while trying to drive forward. You keep glancing back, checking the road behind you, letting what has already passed determine how you feel about what is ahead. And every time you look in that mirror and react to what you see there, you steer the car a little more toward the past. You drift backward. You recreate what was, because your emotional attention is anchored to what was, and your emotional attention is the steering wheel of your life. The invitation is not to rip the rearview mirror off the windshield. It is useful. It tells you where you have been. It gives you context. But you were never meant to drive by staring into it. You were meant to glance at it briefly, take the information, and then return your eyes to the road ahead. To the open, unwritten, unformed stretch of highway that does not yet have a single mile marker on it, because it has not been driven yet. Because it is being created right now, in this moment, by the direction you are facing and the feeling you are carrying as you face it. Stop giving your past the authority to write your future. Stop granting finished results the power to dictate unfinished ones. Stop treating the old film as the only film that exists. There is a new reel. You are holding it in your hands right now. You have been holding it for longer than you know. The only thing left is to walk to the projector, with whatever courage you can gather, with whatever faith you have managed to keep alive beneath the noise and the doubt and the years of evidence that tried to convince you this was all there was, and load it. Press play. Keep your eyes forward, and give the screen time to change. It will.